So I got this ThinkPad T43 from my buddy Tim. He's had it lying around, and I like that it has an S-video output, so I figured that I'd take it home, clean it up, and do the old SATA mod that's possible on a lot of these ThinkPads from around this generation. On this generation of ThinkPads, the South Bridge actually has a SATA interface for things like hard drives, but IBM decided to adapt that to IDE using a bridge chip to maintain compatibility with some of their older peripherals. This mod is more or less removing that bridge chip, trying not to knock any capacitors out of place while you do that, and tapping directly into the SATA bus for your hard drive. I've actually done this mod on my X41 tablet, which is one of my favorite laptops that I own. And the speed increase from IDE is really noticeable, especially if you're using an SSD. If you decide to use one of those SATA to mSATA interposers, then it gives you a lot of extra space to work with too. I've got some thoughts on the construction of this T43. It seems like this ThinkPad specifically, or at least all the ones that are derived from the T40, are put together in a really slapdash way. Like they were adding features and didn't have time or the resources to design a monolithic mid-frame like they did for the T60 and later ThinkPads. There's plastic covers and wire guides, a steel frame here, and half of a magnesium mid-frame holding the motherboard in, and screws just kind of placed wherever to hold everything in. Compared to this, later ThinkPads make much more sense to take apart, but maybe I'm just used to them at this point. A note on SSD choice, you have to make sure that the SSD that you get is SATA 2 and not SATA 3. I think that SATA 3 is backwards compatible with SATA 2, and SATA 2 is backwards compatible with SATA 1, but SATA 3 isn't backwards compatible with SATA 1, and obviously this is a SATA 1 interface. It's kind of a pain, but decent-sized SATA 2 SSDs actually aren't that hard to come by, and Windows 7 doesn't need that much storage anyways. After all that's buttoned up and I know that the SATA interface works, I'll install Windows 7. Once I'm into Windows, I'll use WinFlash to flash a custom community-made BIOS to remove the whitelist for hard drives and network cards. This isn't strictly necessary, it'll still boot and work perfectly fine with the SSD, but every time you boot the computer, it'll throw an error about having the wrong hard drive installed, and I'd rather avoid that. I'll probably end up using this thing to play older video games like SNES or N64 on my CRT with the S-video output.